There are people who live their entire lives without anyone truly knowing them, not because they are ordinary, but because they were created never to be allowed to exist. He was one of them. A spy trained to live in the shadows, to swallow his true identity and replace it with a fabricated story. A man who disappeared not because of death, but because he dissolved entirely into the cover he had built for himself. Imagine this. One day, every record of you vanishes. No birth certificate, no school transcripts, no medical files, no evidence you ever lived. All that remains is another name, another life, and gradually, even you no longer remember who you really are. This is not fiction. It truly happened. And the central figure was a Cold War spy who disappeared completely into his own cover. In the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds, the world lived under constant fear. The Soviet Union and the United States clashed not only with nuclear weapons, but with another kind of war, the invisible war of espionage. This was the era when cover stories were crafted more meticulously than novels. Each deep cover agent needed more than just a false name. They needed an entire replacement life. The CIA, Michigan 6, and the KGB developed an art, creating human beings out of nothing. They forged birth certificates, medical records, even vaccination cards. They staged family photos with actors posing as parents and siblings. They fabricated school transcripts and degrees from institutions no one would ever think to verify. They even hired people to write handwritten letters from family back home, so the agent could read them aloud to friends as if everything were real. The agent didn't play a role, they became the role. Our subject was recruited by the CIA at an early age. Perhaps he was a brilliant young man, gifted with exceptional memory, extraordinary language skills, and most importantly, unburdened by strong ties to family or homeland. People like that could cut loose from the past with ease. He was trained in a brutal program, how to change his voice, how to instinctively react to a new name, how to remember every smallest detail of a fabricated childhood. For example, if someone asked, "Where did you live when you were 10?" he had to answer instantly, recalling not only the street and house, but the smell of damp walls, the creak of the floorboards, the neighbor's dog, all imagined, but memorized as if it were true. In training, this was called memory immersion. Once internalized, the brain no longer distinguished between reality and fiction. And then, one day, he was unleashed into the world. In Europe, in a city that never slept, he appeared as a young businessman. His files said he had studied at an economics school, that he had ties to a few import-export companies. Passport, driver's license, bank cards, all legitimate. Neighbors greeted him by his new name. Colleagues shook his hand at the trade office. Friends invited him for beers, shared family stories, laughed with him late at night. No one knew that every word, every gesture, was part of a script. And it was here that the cracks began to show. At first, he kept his distance. He knew the danger. The closer you got, the easier it was to slip. But a man is not a machine. Gradually, he formed bonds. A woman, a few close friends. Midnight parties where he laughed, spoke, and almost forgot who he really was. But here was the problem. When he laughed, who was laughing? The real man or the name he had become? This is the tragedy of the deep cover agent. The line between truth and fiction erodes day by day. His mission stretched on for years. He was tasked with infiltrating political and economic organizations, building trust, gathering intelligence. Every meeting, every handshake was a move in a chess game. He always carried a private notebook, discreetly recording details about key figures. But the most terrifying risk wasn't exposure. It was when he himself began to forget which notes were real and which belonged to his cover. Once, he nearly slipped. While retelling a childhood story, a friend asked him, "So, where exactly was your school back then?" He froze for just a few seconds, and that silence was enough to make him break into a cold sweat. Then he remembered. Training had prepared an entire map of his childhood. He rattled off street names, the corner market, even the old bakery. His friend laughed and nodded. He was safe. But from that day on, he knew he was completely dependent on fabricated memories. As time passed, his real memories faded. His mother's face, the smell of his hometown, the voices of old friends, all dissolved, replaced by the details written into the cover story. This spy had become a fictional character made flesh. When the Cold War began to cool, spy networks were cut back. Many of his colleagues were recalled, but him no one knows. In CIA files, the pages that once held his real name had vanished. Only the cover story remained, the one he had lived for years. There was no longer a trace of the man who had once been American. A chilling theory emerged. Perhaps even the U.S. government no longer knew who he really was. Some believe he was brought back under witness protection, given an entirely new identity. Others claim he was quietly erased, eliminated to bury the secret. But whispers persist that he never returned at all. That he still lives somewhere, under a cover he can never shed, existing as a man who isn't real. A human being, consumed by his own fabricated story. So who was he? An unsung hero who saved his country in silence? Or a lost soul, trapped forever inside a false identity he could never escape? If even the government has forgotten his true self, does anyone, anywhere, still remember the man behind the shadow? What do you think? Can a person truly disappear inside the fiction of their own life? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep uncovering forgotten files, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Subscribe for the next hidden file.